Chapter 1. Try to eat something, Will. Tomorrow's a big day, after all. Jenny, blonde, pretty, and cheerful, gestured toward Will's barely touched plate and smiled encouragingly at him. Will made an attempt to return the smile, but it was a dismal failure. He picked up the plate before him, piled high with his favorite foods. Tonight, his stomach knotted tight with tension and anticipation. He could hardly bring himself to swallow a bite. Tomorrow would be a big day. He knew it all too well, in fact. Tomorrow would be the biggest day of his life because tomorrow was choosing day, and it would determine how he would spend the rest of his life. Nerves, I imagine, said George, setting down his loaded fork and seizing the lapels of his jacket in a judicious manner. He was a thin, gangly, studious boy, fascinated by rules and regulations, and with a penchant for examining and debating both sides of any question, sometimes at great length. Dreadful thing, nervousness. It can just freeze you up so quick you can't think, can't eat, can't speak. I'm not nervous, Will said quickly, noticing that Horace had looked up, ready to form a sarcastic comment. George nodded several times, considering Will's statement. On the other hand, he added, a little nervousness can actually improve performance. It can heighten your perception and seize your actions. So the fact that you are worried, if in fact you are, is not necessarily something to be worried about of itself, so to speak. In spite of himself, a wry smile touched Will's mouth. George would be a natural in the legal profession, he thought. He would almost certainly be scribe-master's choice for the following morning. Perhaps, Will thought, that was at the heart of his own problem. He was the only one of the wardmates who had any fears about the choosing that would take place within 12 hours. He ought to be nervous, Horace scoffed. After all, which craft master is going to want him as an apprentice? I'm sure we're all nervous, Alice said. She directed one of her rare smiles at Will. We'd be stupid not to be. Well, I'm not, Horace said, then reddened as Alice raised one eyebrow and Jenny giggled. It was typical of Alice, Will thought. He knew that the tall, graceful girl had already been promised a place as an apprentice by the Lady Pauline, head of Castle Redmont's diplomatic service. Her pretense that she was nervous about the following day and her tact in refraining from pointing out Horace's gaffe showed that she was already a diplomat of some skill. Jenny, of course, would gravitate immediately to the castle kitchens, domain of Master Chubb, Redmont's head chef. He was a man renowned throughout the kingdom for the banquets served in the castle's massive dining hall. Jenny loved food and cooking, and her easygoing nature and unfailing good humor would make her an invaluable staff member in the turmoil of the castle kitchen. Battle school would be Horace's choice. Will glanced at his wardmate, now hungrily tucking into the roast turkey, ham, and potatoes that he had heaped onto his plate. Horace was big for his age, and a natural athlete. The chances that he would be refused were virtually non-existent. Horace was exactly the type of recruit that Sir Rodney was looking for in warrior apprentices. Strong, athletic, fit, and, thought Will, a trifle sourly, not too bright. Battle school was the path to knighthood for boys like Horace, born commoners, but with the physical ability to serve as knights of the kingdom, which left Will. What would his choice be? More importantly, as Horace had pointed out, what craftmaster would accept him as an apprentice? For choosing day was the pivotal point in the life of the castle wards. They were orphan children raised by the generosity of Baron Arald, the Lord of Redmont Fief. For the most part, their parents had died in the service of the fief, and the Baron saw it as his responsibility to care for and raise the children of his former subjects, and to give them an opportunity to improve their station in life whenever possible. Choosing day provided that opportunity. Each year, castle wards turning 15 could apply to be apprentices of the masters of various crafts that served the castle and its people. Ordinarily, castle apprentices were selected by dint of their parents' occupation or influence with the craftmasters. The castle wards usually had no such influence, and this was their chance to win a future for themselves. Those wards who weren't chosen, or for whom no openings could be found, would be assigned to farming families in the nearby village, providing farm labor to raise the crops and animals that fed the castle inhabitants. It was rare for this to happen, Will knew. The Baron and his craftmasters usually went out of their way to fit the wards into one craft or another. But it could happen, and it was a fate he feared more than anything. Horace caught his eye and gave a smug smile. Still planning on applying for battle school, Will? He asked, through a mouthful of turkey and potatoes. Better eat something then. You'll need to build yourself up a little. He snorted with laughter, and Will glowered at him. A few weeks previous, Horace had overheard Will confiding to Alice that he desperately wanted to be selected for battle school, and he had made Will's life a misery ever since, pointing out on every possible occasion that Will's slight build was totally unsuited for the rigors of battle school training. The fact that Horace was probably right only made matters worse. Where Horace was tall and muscular, Will was small and wiry. He was agile and fast and surprisingly strong, but he simply didn't have the size that he knew was required of battle school apprentices. He had hoped against hope for the past few years that he would have what people called a growing spurt before the choosing day came around. But it hadn't happened, and now the day was nearly here. Will said nothing. Horace sensed that he had scored a verbal hit. This was a rarity in their turbulent relationship. Over the past few years, he and Will had clashed repeatedly. Being the stronger of the two, Horace usually got the better of Will, although very occasionally Will's speed and agility allowed him to get in a surprise kick or punch and then escape before Horace could catch him. But while Horace generally had the best of their physical clashes, it was unusual for him to win on any of their verbal encounters. Will's wit was as agile as the rest of him and almost always managed to have the last word. In fact, it was this tendency that often led to trouble between them. Will was yet to learn that having the last word was not always a good idea. Horace decided now to press his advantage. "You need muscles to get into battle school, Will. Real muscles," he said, glancing at the others around the table to see if anyone disagreed. The other wards, uncomfortable at the growing tension between the two boys, concentrated on their plates. "Particularly between the ears," Will replied, and, unfortunately, Jenny couldn't refrain from giggling. Horace's face flushed, and he started to rise from his seat. But Will was quicker. He was already at the door before Horace could disentangle himself from the chair. He contented himself with hurling a final insult after his retreating wardmate. "That's right, run away, Will No-Name. You're a no-name, and nobody will want you as an apprentice." In the anteroom outside, Will heard the parting sally, and felt blood flush to his cheeks. It was the taunt he hated most. Although he had tried never to let Horace know that, sensing that he would provide the bigger boy with a weapon if he did. The truth was, nobody knew Will's second name. Nobody knew who his parents had been. Unlike his yearmates who had lived in the fief, and whose family histories were known, Will had appeared virtually out of nowhere as a newborn baby. He'd been found wrapped in a small blanket and placed in a basket on the steps of the ward building 15 years ago. A note had been attached to the blanket, reading simply, "His mother died in childbirth. His father died a hero. Please care for him. His name is Will." This has been the first half of Chapter 1 of Ranger's Apprentice, Book 1, The Ruins of Gorlan. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to subscribe for more upcoming videos.